My name is Ben Bolton. Welcome to another edition of the Insurindex Podcast, where we explore what makes great insurance brands tick. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Simon Doggett, who's design and product leader at Key Insurance, which is, it says here, a standout digital brand in the London specialty market. So I'm really interested today to be looking at this because it's a complete, well, it's not a new angle, but I think it's what everybody's talking about these days. So for those listeners, watchers who don't know the Key story in very brief terms, and I'm sure Simon will flesh this out as we go through, but Key launched in 2021, the world's first fully digital follow-only syndicate. It's Fairfax backed and provides brokers basically with algorithmic driven follow capacity in seconds. And the most interesting point about it for me is it was the fastest growing startup in Lloyd's ever. And is now even features in our very own Gracechurch brand rankings. So it must be flying if it's going to get in there. So what we'll be talking about today, and it is worth a bit of explanation, is we'll be talking about, in context of insurance technology, I think a new concept for a lot of people in the market is design thinking, and how all of this kind of collides or works with what is a very traditional world still of underwriting and claims, I guess. And we'll look at Key's ambition and where it wants to go and try and bring that out into the context of where it's all going in the future. So Simon, welcome, first of all.
Ben, thanks for having me.
Brilliant. So let me just start very quickly. I like to ask people a bit about their background, who they are. So just tell me a bit about your early years. What did you want to be when you grew up? All those sorts of things.
Gosh, well, where should I start? After I realised I wasn't going to be a rock star or a professional golfer, I started working in startups in Shoreditch in the early 2000s. I think I sort of realised the timing was good to. There was, the Silicon Roundabout thing was starting, and there were quite a lot of companies based in East London. I was really interested in software design. I was a technologist at heart. There was a lot of opportunity. So I think 2005, I joined Just Giving, the fundraising startup. Oh, yeah. And that was kind of my first foray into, I think, that kind of mix of what user-centered design can do, what you can do if you're taking something that's been traditionally done offline. At the time it was really sponsored me to do the London Marathon and whatever it was. And, we're allowing people to build web pages and handling all the transactions and all the gift aid. And so I did that for 4 years. Then some time in agencies, and then quite a lot of time in big kind of transformation projects. I worked at ITV for a while. At the beginning of their foray into improving ITV Player, we were running the text competition voting mechanics for the X Factor and stuff like that.
I remember there was a lot of controversy about that originally, wasn't there?
Yeah. And then I did similar at Marks and Spencer, sort of their 2015 era digital transformation work, when they were sort of trying to figure out their offline business and their digital business and how they were going to work together.
Yeah.
And then I've done a lot of work at big consumer scale-ups.
Right.
So I spent a lot of time at Net-a-Porter and at Farfetch. So that was kind of the other end of, what can you sell to people online? Can you sell, luxury watches to people? Can you, figuring out how the luxury industry applied to the digital market? And then some fintech stuff too. So worked at ClearScore during their big growth period and over COVID as well. And then ended up working at Key. So that was, when was that? That was early 2024. So I've been there almost 2 years.
So it's interesting, isn't it, when you think of those your kind of milestones, and actually when they happen at the time, you kind of think, oh, they're just things that you read about. But actually now you look back, you go, wow, they were like really kind of pivotal moments. A lot of them to do with technology, but a transformation really point in an industry, weren't they? And those you hear a lot about these, and I always think you look back, and I wonder now, we're going to have some of those with. I mean, Key's probably one of them with commercial insurance as we go forward, because it has been relatively untouched, hasn't it?
I think that was one of the big attractors for me.
Yeah.
So, I very much position myself as an outsider coming in. And as a technologist coming in, I think, my team, I run a design team of pretty specialist researchers, designers, and, content folks who most of us, in fact, all of us have come from outside. We've done lots of things. I think,
Right.
When you're a designer, we get to try out lots of different industries. There's often quite a lot of parity between the problems that are being solved. Sometimes they're completely new, but Key was unique in that I hadn't seen something so relatively untouched.
Yeah.
When it presented itself as an opportunity. And, you talk about those sort of pivotal moments, like we're in the middle of one right now with everything that's happening in AI. And I think everyone's looking at what that might mean for how they do their job and the future of their businesses. But, I've lived through the two previous ones as well. I mean, I remember back in 2008, I went for a meeting at the MySpace office in Soho. Do you remember MySpace?
Yeah, I remember MySpace.
When I was working at Just Giving, and that was the beginning of social media opening up.
Yeah.
And then the Facebook app marketplace was everything changed from email all your friends to now you can post messages to all your friends, and the way that people were using social media tools changed massively. And then really soon after that, there was the mobile revolution. So, up until that point, everything had been very desktop browser focused.
Yeah.
We were doing a lot of, I think, classic web design. And then all of a sudden it was, we've got touchscreens, we've got phones of different sizes. Then you've got new app stores, and you've got all of these different platforms going in different places.
And this is, compared with, many years ago, I think when technology first came in, and there was some kind of things that are often quoted about, we'll only ever need 2 mainframe servers or something, whatever that phrase was. But it seems to me nowadays that actually this kind of technology is so much part of the fabric of our lives, and the whole thing about social media and children and AI now getting into everything, that it's no longer that we dismiss this as a fad or a fashion, is it? This is now something that we, whether it's good or bad, it doesn't really matter. It's kind of, we have to embrace it, don't we? This whole technological kind of revolution that's constantly going on.
Definitely. And I've always enjoyed anticipating what might happen as a result. And I think, a big part of our job is making alternative versions of the future to help everyone figure out where might we go in based on how this technology is changing people's behavior.
Yeah.
It's being at ITV when Netflix launched in the UK, for example. I think what we were doing at the time we thought was the right sort of work, and then the speed at which they grew and the speed at which media consumption at home, combined with, we used to call it second screening back then, of everyone being on their phones at the same time as they were on telly. And we were thinking about this in the context of, ITV's was all about those live shows and like that kind of live interaction and sort of figuring that stuff out.
So one thing in that sense kind of leads on to the other, doesn't it? In your world, it's like you do something and you think it's going to be like this, and then when you get there, you go, well, it is like that, but actually it could be like that. Mm-hmm. So we could ditch that thing altogether.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Very interesting for insurance, because I think it's arguable that insurance has held on to a lot of things that perhaps it shouldn't have done and now needs to let go of them. So let me just go, just one question before we go into it. What sort of, do you have to have relevant qualifications for what you do, or is it just... There's a variety of things that you could... It's
a variety of things. Yeah. I think, I've been doing this for over 20 years now. You can go off and get a degree in product design or interaction design. You can go via the software engineering route, computer science, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I am very much a product of, I think, being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And I think building out a fairly broad network, but like there was a really big, certainly in London, really, and the UK in general, I think there was just a massive increase in funding for technology.
Yeah.
Huge growth. We had big West Coast players opening offices.
Sure,
here,
the whole insurtech phase.
Absolutely,
yeah, that was big.
And I think combined with the UK was always really good at e-commerce, fintech, and agencies.
Yeah.
And really we've been sort of surfing that for the last sort of 2 decades or so, with quite a lot of homegrown success. So I've done both. I've worked for UK-based companies that have been very sort of focused on their local market, and then big global companies that are kind of serving everyone. So now being in a Lloyd syndicate that is focused on a much comparatively smaller number of people. There's always it was the gap on my CV, to be honest. I always wanted to do something that was very B2B focused.
Yeah.
I think relatively, comparatively niche. And then when you combine that with, I think, this current state of digital transformation within the market, and the potential of what's to come, and then being able to be somewhere that is helping to figure that out, that's a massive attractor.
Yeah, and that whole business to business market now and how that could change is, to me as well, it's just fascinating, really, because it, historically it's been seen as incredibly dependent on all these personal relationships, which of course it still is. Mm-hmm. But everybody's now realizing, wow, there's still a heck of a lot of efficiency that could be built into that. And then does that create opportunity, of course? Yeah. So what were your first impressions of the good old London market?
Well, I think, I'd caveat this by saying, my experience is kind of only through the Key lens. So, Key is a bit of a chameleon, because on the one side, to me, it looks like a very normal technology company, and roughly half of Key is a technology team made up of, software engineers and algorithm engineers and data folks and product managers, and my design team. So far, so normal, right? But then you've got the entire commercial side of the business, which was quite new to me. There was a big ramp up, I think, in terms of, we would call it the vocab test in my team. Right, there's a lot of, if you've not come up in that market, there's a lot of language you have to understand, a lot of acronyms. I wouldn't say more than in other industries I've been in, but certainly in order to be credible, you've got to understand the dynamics of what's happening, be able to understand what people are sort of saying to you, and I think certainly the dynamics of trading. So that was, I think, it's a big challenge, I think, not just for us, but it's going to be for other companies in the space who are looking to bring in outside talent.
Well, I think it is, and I've been quite, I wouldn't say outspoken, but I have been kind of pushing on the fact there is too much jargon, and jargon is typically very exclusionary. It's really designed to be that. It's a protector, isn't it, of people in the industry? And of course, I don't think that's true of all jargon in the industry, because you need some. Because you kind of do need your own language for certain things that are special to your industry. But my God, the amount of jargon in this industry, and I had the same experience when I first came in, was the kind of old lags would just reel off sentences, and I thought, well, I didn't get half of that, so I've just got to pretend I understood it. And then nowadays I kind of get it and think, well, actually it is moving more towards plain English, and actually we're pushing on that. So I think it might change, actually.
And hopefully. I think technologists have been guilty in the past of doing the same thing.
Yeah,
you think how many technology folks or external consultancies can come in, speak a lot of jargon, and everyone goes, well, this sounds about right. Don't really understand what's going on. So, I mean, my team, we're interested in, like, that is a fascinating problem space. How do we get everyone to understand the dynamics of the classes of business that we're operating in, dynamics of, I joined as the market was starting to soften.
Yeah.
Had to understand what that meant. And then you combine that with having been in, lots of very competitive startups and scale-ups who are in that, run up to IPO. Their goal is to not really work with their competition. It's to destroy it or take it over or acquire it or kind of be the biggest and the best. So I think the fact that Lloyd's is looking for everyone to be successful, to have that consistency, for just that dynamic's been fascinating to experience. But I haven't actually answered your question yet on my initial impressions, because the other thing I would say, I did my little sort of tour around the business, and it was really interesting meeting everyone. I remember going to the team meeting for all of our account managers, and they wanted me to tell them how old-fashioned everything was. In a way.
I see.
There's almost this kind of, it's not, it's not full on flagellation, but there is, I do get this kind of undertone of like, well, we know we're a bit old fashioned.
Catharsis.
And we know, yes. And it's like, please just tell us, you've come in from outside. You've
tell us how
been in
terrible
these
we
kind
are.
just tell it to our face. It's not that bad. I think it's,
No.
I think all of the human stuff that's going on makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's just, I think the thing that has taken a bit of time to adjust to is the comparative lack of digital layers to a lot of these interactions. So there's a lot of, I've not sent as many emails in previous jobs than I have in this one. There's a lot of Microsoft Word documents and Excel spreadsheets and emails flying around, and I've come from businesses where almost everyone's staring at the same platform with the same kind of visualizations, and there's almost an established kind of digital home that everyone experiences when they come to work. So I know the fact I think we can have a crack at figuring out what that is quite exciting.
I think one thing I would just kind of observe, I think your point's well made about the competitive aspects, but also there's this whole collaboration, which often you have in B2B. But I think my impression is that particularly in specialty insurance, it's incredibly important because you're trying to, in what is a quite highly regulated environment, discover and find these new risks and then all work together from different angles, because you're broking and underwriting and all that, to kind of make that work and get the capital to match it, which is, I don't think it's necessarily unusual, but it does feel like a lot of this, the history is about, heart and just the process of selling and the whole culture of that and how that works. And it works quite well in lots of ways to deliver a product. And now you bring technology or change into that, and it's quite tricky, isn't it, for people to feel that we might throw the baby out with the bathwater, I guess, is the fear, isn't it, to some extent?
I think I've not had too much of a kind of frontline sense of some of the fear, but I think I think the approach that we're taking, and I think one of the reasons key was, one of the things that attracted me, they're very adamant about someone coming in not from the market.
Yes.
And that gives you space. It gives you permission. It gives you permission to ask what might feel like a stupid, obvious question. But it also gives us, I think, permission to, really go quite deep on what people are actually doing day to day, like what those workflows look like. It took us a while to figure out what the talent needed to look like within a design team. I realized quite quickly, when you look at the square mile in what we do, most of the comparative teams are working in, investment banking, FX trading, fintech, that kind of thing. Very, not as much in insurance, and there certainly didn't seem to be much of a kind of community around that on the technology or the design side, which coming from fintech was unusual. I'd say in my ClearScore days, ClearScore is, I think, still the biggest credit scoring app in the UK. Is probably the biggest. I think it's bigger than Money Supermarket in terms of how many partners it has and how many credit products it provides a service for. It was interesting, I think, to just try and understand what does this team need to look like to understand the workflows and then actually come up with things that will be useful to people, whilst I think still being respectful and helping to preserve the bits that make it special.
Sure.
And a lot of that is that, it's the relationships, it's the way that business is done. We don't really have any interest in disrupting the bits that work.
No.
I think we're there to help the bits that could go a bit quicker and taking too much time, and or they're just there's a lot of quite manual, quite busy work process that's involved.
Yeah.
And these people are busy.
Yeah.
So if we can actually get FaceTime with them, my researchers have done a good job, I think, in the time that we do get with brokers in particular. It's interesting, actually, because I think having done lots and lots of testing sessions in previous jobs on all sorts of industries, when I worked in menswear, we used to go to people's houses and they'd give us wardrobe tours on, all sorts of stuff. So then when you actually speak to a broker, you get to see what they're actually doing, understand the bits that they dread, the bits that they enjoy, the bits where they're interfacing with us and where they're not, and where some of those opportunities are. For a lot of them, I think it's the first time that anyone's ever really taken much interest in that. Then if we can then actually close that loop and then improve the product in a meaningful way based on the feedback that they've given us, I think that's when things start to get really sticky. And I think they kind of appreciate that what we're trying to do for them in the follow market.
So let me just, no jargon. What does Key do? What's the elevator
does Key
pitch?
do? Well, again, Key does lots of things, but I think the thing I keep coming back to is Key gives you follow quotes in less than 10 seconds. It prevents you from having to wait for an underwriter to get back to you. So Key has a proprietary algorithm. We are sort of flying the flag for algorithmic underwriting. And it means that you can get quotes back much more quickly. And then there's a whole bunch of process that happens after that.
Yeah.
But my team's focus, I think, on that sort of broker side is how can we help with I think channeling that capacity, get people the numbers that they need to see, save them some time so they can focus more on their lead opportunities. And then on the other side, we've got an entire suite of tools that we use internally that helps our underwriting teams and helps there's a series of tools, some of which I think we have got still a lot more work to do, that are helping our internal teams be more effective.
So when you say tools, Simon, what sort of things are these things on screens that people can kind of move around?
These are websites that you are, there's a thing that you're logging into. It's a thing that you're going to have running in a tab next to your Outlook. Yeah, you're going to be switching between it, that Excel, something else, maybe Slack, maybe Teams, and it's helping you with your decisioning. It's helping you with getting results quickly.
But this is the kind of human mind working with some technology to say, I'm going to make a judgment on something. I'm going to do this or that or the other. Which is So that's and that's I worked back in the early days with Bloomberg and Reuters. And it was fantastic looking at some of the Reuters people because they had this kind of Rolls-Royce system, and there were fund managers who were kind of extremely expert at doing charts and all this sort of stuff in predicting what would happen to stocks and equities and everything else. But that seems like a long, long time ago. But this is now really only starting to come into the insurance market.
It's funny, I use the Bloomberg analogy quite a lot because when I was hiring for my team earlier in the year, I think we sort of realized that we needed to find data visualization experts. Yes. Because so the one things that we had buckets of were data.
Yeah.
Both, all sorts of different sources. So that was an opportunity. It's like we can go around the business, we can interview these folks, we can then actually come up with a visualization of this is what the Key algorithm actually is, demystify it a bit. So we did that, and it was amazing seeing that slide work its way around the business really quickly. As
people need those basic understandings, don't they?
And then take it out to partners, and they go, right, okay, we get it. And then, I was speaking to folks in my network, investment banks and, other kind of, I suppose, Bloomberg adjacent companies with a lot of places that defined what these dashboards, what these experiences look like. What are the numbers you need to see? What is the thing that's going to help you, I think, ignore the noise and then focus on the thing that's going to help you make a good decision in that moment. Needed to go and find some of those folks because we hadn't really done any of that work in that market. And if we can actually get some of that right for our internal tools, then potentially there's options to do things with partners as well. So
you're doing that now with brokers in this market, essentially the same thing, is it? To create the experience and work out exactly what they need and how those tools need to work.
The big difference I think that me and my team make is we consider the human factors. We are thinking of the person at the end of this thing. What do they need it to do? Where does it sit within their workflow? Is it doing a good job of getting them that answer or not?
Right.
And then what does that need to look like? And could that actually be more than one thing? So maybe it is a platform, a portal that you log into and you have open on a tab. Maybe it's an API. Maybe it's data that's actually coming into tools you already use, and that we're providing that. I think there's all sorts of interesting directions that this can go, but we are fairly agnostic on what that should be. If it's, what matters to us is solving that problem.
There's a thing, I don't know whether you've done work on this, but there's something I feel and seen a bit in research is that when people have the right tools, they feel quite inspired to do more. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you do any work on that? Because I think, when people, and I think it can be as true of software as any other, like using a plane or a lathe or whatever it is, I think it feels like that can happen. But a lot of the time, I think people are turned off because they don't get that experience. It's the opposite sometimes,
I think what's interesting in, I worked through the big Slack revolution.
Yes.
Right. I was at Marks and Spencer when Slack started to become a thing. I remember them coming into our office and doing full day workshops on how to use it. There was a massive push on, this is back in, 2017 or so, 2016. And I think there's still tools like that can be so transformative in, say, solving a really simple problem like communication in groups.
Yeah,
getting people out of their inboxes and actually collaborating together more effectively. When you work in product and when you do something where you're making stuff, you've got stakeholders to keep informed. You've got engineers building stuff for you. You've got a vision that you're trying to work towards. Like the toolkit that you use to do that is hugely important. There's tons of efficiency there. So I think what's interesting coming back to somewhere like Key, where a lot of the folks that we're working with externally, I'd forgotten actually how heavy a lot of that work is.
Yeah.
Those spreadsheets are heavy. Those PDFs are heavy. Those contracts are heavy. Like there's an awful lot of opportunity for technology to just lighten that a bit. And so it's the biggest wins I've seen is when you take something that someone dreads doing every day and you diminish that, and then you make it take less time.
Yeah.
And if you can even make it feel nice, then that's when you can see.
Well, filling the slip was always a big pain point for brokers because they had to physically walk around the market.
Right.
I mean, do they do that less now? I mean, I haven't really looked.
Again, I'd say like we spent time. That was, as a design challenge, that's a really interesting one because you've got to take that mental model of the order of data on that slip and how you should enter it. You've got to transition that into a digital environment.
Yeah.
What's the best way of doing that? Because you can, certain classes of businesses, they're probably going to want it. Well, they might want to know it needs to be exactly the same. I've been doing it this way for this period of time. There's going to be others that be like, right, automate as much of that as possible. I only want to focus on these very specific fields, right? That are really critical for this for this particular slip. Or maybe it's a bit of both. So like I think we've got options in the digital space to do things that can make that feel like a digital version of an analog experience. And sometimes people want that. That's fine. And sometimes you can do something that is potentially a bit different, and just in terms of how you're inputting that data.
Yeah.
I mean, you think of how many times that you've bought something online and put your credit card into a form, right? And you can contrast that to what that was like even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Took a lot longer to how quickly you can process a transaction now.
Yeah.
And just how automatic that almost feels. Like I feel like we're at the beginning of making parts of the process that perhaps don't need as much attention feel a bit easier.
Yeah. So Key, does what it does now, and I assume it's sort of from what you've said, it's kind of a catalyst, one of the catalysts for change in a market that's quite traditional. Mm-hmm. What do you kind of see as its potential opportunities as it goes forward? What is it? I mean, you can take it as wide as you like, but what is it? Because these things don't stand still, do they? As we said before, you kind of do one thing and then the next thing, and so on and so forth.
I mean, I think so. Really, I with my team, we only like to think about what we've got a year ahead of us,
right?
Which is ironic because we spend quite a lot of time, I think, helping work on sort of 3 to 5 year strategy plans as well in terms of where the product could go. But for my team, next year our focus is, we're in the middle of an AI revolution, right? That's interesting on two fronts for us, because we've got how can AI improve our own internal processes as a team and as a wider technology group? What's the potential there? What's that going to allow us to do? Where might it help us refocus our time and our attention? And then you've got the product experience AI lens of what might this do to the Key experience? And those are sort of two things that we're looking at pretty seriously.
And you've got to keep ahead of the curve as well, haven't you? There's threats to you as well, because I mean, I've talked to a lot of technologists who go, well, we can get the magic into the phone or whatever it is, a smartphone, but once we've done it, there'll be 1,000 companies who say, well, I can do that better. They might be sitting in a garage somewhere in their bedroom doing it these days, I guess. But there's always that keeps you on your toes, I guess.
It does, but then I think in this market, it's a bit of an open call. Like I want to find other teams that are doing similar things to us.
You want the competition.
We need it. Yeah, we need it. I mean, we're looking more external at what's happening and making sure that we don't fall behind. Because don't forget, vast majority of our technology talent comes from outside the market. It can just as easily leave again as it came in, right? So we have to make, there are two problems, I think, with technology talent. Even more underlined, I think, in specialty insurance, because firstly, you've got to build a culture that is close enough to a technology welcoming culture that people are going to go, right, I can visualize myself working here, right? And this is, and these are things I think that banks and other folks in the city figured out at least a decade ago, right? So you've got to do that first. Then you've got to figure out how to keep the problem space interesting enough that they stick around, and make sure that there's enough space to make. And release stuff quickly, get feedback quickly, not get in the way of any of the kind of the trading dynamics. And we're still very much, I think, figuring some of that out.
So you're saying something as well, which I think is quite new and different for the market. Several years ago, I saw a speech by Mike McGavick, who was the CEO of what was then AXA XL. He'd been XL. And he was an extremely eloquent speaker. He was a senator in the US, so he was a brilliant speaker. But he said that the problem with insurance is it's a regulated industry. It's very insurance focused, jargon, all the other stuff. No one technologist in the world will ever come and want to work for us. So what we have to do is kind of outsource that, was his view.
Right.
But you're now saying, actually, no, unfortunately, that doesn't work very well. Really?
Well, I'm not saying it doesn't work, but I think it's too interesting a problem space for companies not to be building their own internal teams. I think more of the gap is they don't know how to do it. Look at, again, I'll use the M&S example. When I was at M&S, they actually built 2 completely separate technology teams.
Yeah.
There was the traditional corporate IT team that had been around decades, obviously, heritage brand. I think they'd had a few go-arounds of trying to figure out the commerce stuff. They'd had a partnership with Amazon that they realized probably wasn't strategically in their best interest. The team I joined, they, again, specifically hired folks from startups and from government digital service and from other really proven successful technology businesses, and we were in a separate building. And that was the approach in 2014, 2015. I don't think that's necessarily appropriate now. I don't think you need to go that far, but you do need to think about what's the cultural mix you need to have to be able to do that in-house, and then shift from, I think it's as much a mindset shift from, we've come up with a set of top-down requirements of we need this feature, we need you to build this thing. Please go and build it. Here's a budget, here's a delivery date, and how many instances can we all think of when that's not gone well? Versus, I think, having a team who have the ability to go really deep with the SMEs, go really deep on the workflows and the where the I think the optimization opportunities are, and then work with those folks to help them to realize it and make it into something real. Like we spend a lot of time prototyping, and I think next year I'm really excited about, I think AI is going to help our prototyping workflows massively, because we'll be able to do them faster. They will have more real data in them that will make them feel more real, and then we can actually put more provocative interfaces in front of people and say, well, we've had some interesting chats recently with partners about, like, what do you think this thing is? What do you think this job is going to look like in 3-5 years?
So how do you do prototyping? Just tell me briefly what that entails.
Yeah, we it's not a kind of it's actually quite simple. I think
that's fine. I like simple things.
We figure out the right group of people to talk to. So there's quite a degree of upfront research. We always like to blend our qual and our quant, and but qual is spending time actually shadowing people, seeing what they're actually doing. And then taking that, combining it with some of the big data that we have, and then making something that feels as close to real as possible. So if it's, say, a dashboard for an underwriting team, or it's a new experience or even just a new version of obtaining quotes for a certain class of business, the more real we can make that feel. And say, how far off is this? How and what are those sort of reactions like? I think in insurance there's been a little bit too much, we'll tell you what we think it needs to be, and please go and build that, and then that product might not end up being successful. We're always looking for the gaps, and we're always looking for, that's often where some of those eureka moments come from. Like, you look at any other technology industry, where, or even some of the apps we all use on our phones every single day, very, very few of them were created because there was like a top-down vision. It was often bottom-up research combined with data, lots of iteration, lots of feedback, lots of provocation, often to get it wrong, to make sure that you do work towards that thing.
And I think that kind of iterative approach is really useful, but also you're in that, once you get kind of down and dirty with people who actually do this stuff, you see the messiness of humans and how they operate, but also why that's effective. Because humans kind of have to make that work, and they're very good at it typically. I mean, particularly in this market, I think they are good at it.
Definitely.
And I think that's a great way of working. It was interesting. I think some of the early days of some of the it might have been the Tom testing or the Blueprint 2 testing in Lloyd's. I think there was some work done on exactly that. And I remember talking to some of the people involved, and it was actually kind of put out publicly as well that it was really successful, because when they just talked to people, whereas one of my criticisms of the original Blueprint was, it just kind of said, well, we're going to do all these things and then the customer will get things faster and that's what they want.
Yeah.
But even that assumption isn't correct.
No.
It's just an assumption that people want things quickly. I used to get this in claims, which was, well, obviously they want it quicker.
Yes.
And I asked a claims head when I saw that, I said, do you always want to pay out straight away? And he said, no, quite often we put claims money into escrow accounts.
Right, yeah.
For companies that don't want to take that money at a particular point in their financial cycle. Right?
Yeah.
And I went, well, there we are. So that's completely disproved the whole, generic theory that everybody wants things. They don't, because there are times when you don't. And
Absolutely.
people want things tailored if they can get it.
Yeah. And I think the golden rule is we're not asking people what they want. Right. And
no, you're interpreting.
It's that so I don't want to get in trouble with my researchers, because it's a difficult and very specialist job to do that. And then you have to layer in, I think, the relationships and those sort of dynamics, and like brokers don't have tons of time to spare. The last thing we want to do is waste their time. So yeah, it takes it took me a while also to figure out like the specialisms I needed within my team. I think, there'll be, I'm sure there'll be folks listening to this who've got, they might have a data team, they might have an engineering team, or kind of at the beginnings of one, but they probably don't have any designers yet. And they probably haven't figured out what is the glue that's going to hold these things together. And that is most of the work that we're doing. We are basically stitching together our other bits of the business to help them work together on things, and then I think help align people around like what some of these solutions might be, and I think drive a bit of excitement. I really want. I see this industry as it's been hugely positive for me so far to sort of find it in its current state, and then see how comparatively greenfield it is in terms of what we can do. Certainly from the technology perspective, I can't think of another a comparable industry as we almost in coming 2026. It's not really there.
No.
So that was a huge attractor.
So just a quick aside, the brand of Key now, that how do you kind of view that in the market? How's that kind of developed? Because it's quite well known, isn't it? And it's kind of coming through as a brand, and it's certainly not a traditional insurer. It's not a broker or a carrier or a MGA. It's a thing on its own, isn't it? In a sense,
it is. I think it's been intentionally designed to, I think, be flexible.
Yeah.
Currently.
Yeah.
And I think I did a bit of work with Leslie, our head of marketing last year. I think just trying to figure out, we need to cover various different bases with the Key brand. It needs to make sense in the technology space, and that's both within the market and outside of it, right? Especially if talent and people are a huge part of who we are.
Yeah.
And then you also don't want it to feel like it's a box under the stairs that's just got two engineers working on it, right? It's also got to feel very human, and that there are people that work at Key, and that, we've got underwriters, we've got all of these, we have all of these specialists and all of this knowledge. Yeah. So I think it's going to be a bit more a kind of continued work in progress, and it's
kind of useful to people.
I think
in a sense.
So. Yeah, it's a tool, but it's also it's a syndicate. I think that was the thing. It took me a while to get my head around that. I think before I joined, I was like, oh, it's just a website. It's not just so much more than that.
But it's a syndicate, and it's regulated.
And it's regulated. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it's different to just a SaaS tool that you might subscribe to. It's really not that. So the brand challenge, I think, is going to continue to evolve, and I'm be interested to see how we can continue to make that compelling going forward.
So let's just talk about that a couple of minutes. Just what do you see as the sort of next 5 years? I mean, I know this is a guess. It is for everybody, but what's your kind of feeling of where it goes in the future? I mean, just generally, and then come back to Phoenix,
I think I think it's wide open. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of noise, a lot of investment around AI at the moment. Obviously, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure to spend on AI research and figuring out where those opportunities are and what that means. So I think you've got to get your principles together in terms of why would we do this? Is it actually going to save us any money?
And everybody's looking at use cases at the moment, aren't they? And trying to find
what are those use cases? Is it going to give us the accuracy that we need? Is it going to help people actually within those workflows? So I think that's massive. But I think, when you really stretch it out over that 5-year period, I think I think we will go through now this sort of revolution of what the broker experience looks like in that digital layer, while still being really respectful of the really important human aspects of it, and the face-to-face stuff. I don't think that's going to go anywhere. So how that interplays, super interesting. I think anyone approaching that positively with the right mindset, I think we can do some really interesting work there. But then I think this is a slightly nerdy bit, but there's that, what is that, that one single kind of product surface experience for underwriters and for all of those back office teams that could, maybe replace some of those spreadsheets, help reduce a few emails, help, what does that look like? And I think hopefully in 5 years' time it exists and people's jobs are a little bit, easier.
Because these insurance, they're often called classes of business or lines of business, which is a bit of an odd phrase. But I see them as products, really. And actually, if you take it in the personal lines business, of course, you have products. You have a pet product or a motor product or whatever. And it does work. I think it's the same in B2B, but I don't think we've had the time or the space to really develop those. There are a few kind of interesting things. I don't know if you probably don't, but kidnap and ransom and things like that. They're all kind of really interesting.
Very interesting.
And very, very adaptable because the work has gone into the wordings and the technicals on that. So you can kind of make the risk work or the risk transfer work. And yet they can be, so K&R, like, it used to be, and it still is used, obviously, for actual kidnaps.
Yes.
But it can be used, for example, for executives who get delayed.
Yeah. Wow.
And then there's a whole, just because if your chief executive's stuck at an airport because of a volcano exploding under through, you can get, then the K&R thing kicks in. And, that sort of thing, I think, is innovation in a sense. But presumably your kind of product and service helps that to happen because people have got the time and space to think about it.
Yeah, there's definitely a hope in that. Yeah, the product side of it, that kind of product mindset, can help to bed in a little bit. And I think, the technology will be in the background. I don't think it necessarily needs to be, doesn't need to make itself the star. It's not really how, admittedly, I've not been in the market for long, but that's sort of how it feels. And I think that's okay. So I think I don't think it's going to change as quickly as other industries have. I don't think it's going to be the same boom that we saw in certain parts of other parts of the city. But the fact that it is happening at the same time as pretty much the biggest technological revolution that's ever happened, right? I mean, we don't want to underplay it. Yeah. That means that it's all the more important to figure out what does that mean strategically, and what does that mean culturally, what does that mean in terms of people, what does that mean in terms of growth, and certainly within a Lloyd's perspective, what does it mean for everyone to sort of stay within that balance, within that, without things getting too chaotic.
It is potentially somewhat existential, though, isn't it? Because capital can come from anywhere.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to come from an insurer.
No.
And it doesn't. I mean, it comes from ILS or capital providers or even banks. And you could see a world where insurance suddenly starts to fall behind.
I mean, I'm interested on that because I come from, a lot of VC-backed, PE-backed companies in my past when like there was, with one thing we'd often talk about was like, what does the money think? And this is relatively new to me, I think, in terms of this market. But like, what's your take on that in terms of when you look at, say, for example, an investment in technology or bringing things in house, or none of it's cheap. Costs are going to increase, and if there is a kind of market-wide push for lowering costs, or I'm like, how do you see that playing out? I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think there are interesting businesses like Acrisure and others, that are saying we'll just literally plug in our product straight direct into the insurers, through APIs and so on. So that's kind of one aspect of it. I think the other, which is, Amazon made a foray into the market, but it was very light and just, I think, a tester almost. Yeah. But there was some very good articles after that, I think, which got it right, which said, but Amazon wasn't doing its normal play, which is to own the platform.
Yeah.
And actually, when you look at insurance, I think owning the platform is incredibly interesting.
Yes.
And arguably is kind of what some insurers are trying to, and even brokers, everybody's fighting over how much of it can we own so that we can maximize, the profit from switching something off over here and turning it on over, exactly what Amazon does. It has that power in the market. And so it doesn't seem a stretch to me that could start to become more of a temptation for those businesses. Of course, nowadays it would be Google and Amazon, but equally it could be any of the new players coming in who will have to monetize their AI at some point.
Yeah.
They may select an industry that they say is pretty old-fashioned and we could take it tomorrow. So I don't necessarily... I think culturally that might be quite tough for them, as always. Yeah, because people still run businesses, and that's that, and it's kind of highly regulated as well.
Yes.
But I don't think it's out of the question. It's kind of my take on it. So this has been great, Simon. I just want to kind of finish off with a final question. We've talked a bit about talent, and you're a kind of new sort of person in the market with new skills, and we've talked about that being brought into the market as opposed to being just outsourced. So what would you say to people who've got your kind of background or a design background or any kind of background in others? Would it be worth coming into insurance? Is it a good place to come? What are the benefits or whatever?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we've got a bit more role creation to do first.
Yes.
Certainly on the design side. I think there's, engineering teams are springing up. There's data teams. There's, algo folks very in demand.
Yeah.
The bit that does often get forgotten about is how our end users interfacing with that thing, and that's just part of it. I think the other part is, I think the big attractor to me was how the greenfield ahead of us, and that no one's really got there. There's some ideas, but it's not like it's really been fixed on like this is where we're all heading in 5 years time, and it looks like this. So to have an opportunity to potentially help shape that is, I think, for any designer really attractive. And same for product folks too. So I think I would sort of say it's really possible to make syndicates attractive to outsiders. I think there needs to be, you've got to look at your internal culture. You've got to look at what your technology culture looks like currently. Where might it need to change? And then if you do that at the same time as you look at what is happening in technology right now, I think it's a perfect time to start thinking about it, start investing, because I think the returns can be potentially fairly swift. If you do it well. It's just difficult to execute if you've not seen it done before, and if you don't hire from outside the market, I think you're going to struggle, because we are all bringing the perspective we have of having it seeing it go well, seeing it fail multiple times over the preceding years. So there's a lot to be learned from there, and it means that we hopefully, I think, making fewer mistakes as we continue.
And you're hiring in with those people who've got that experience with those mistakes, as opposed to a kind of naive approach where you don't know what's going to happen and it happens, and that's So you've got to pay for that experience in a sense. But for those people coming in, I think you've said that there is quite a lot of openness to new people coming in and actually challenging the status quo and changing it.
Yeah, I think we're doing it sensitively, and it's not. I don't think it's even really sort of challenging it. It's more about presenting an alternative. Right. Instead of just saying, why is it? Or this is all. And there was, when I go back to the account manager, they almost wanted me to say, oh my God, look at this. I can't believe you're doing that. It's more about, what if it was this?
Yeah, and I think
let's have a conversation about that.
I think you've talked, and other people have talked about this in marketing functions when we talked about brand, for example, saying actually it's less about the barriers it's really about understanding the business, understanding the challenge, being part of the business. And I think you're saying the same thing. It's just you happen to have a different set of skills from the underwriters or the claims people or the actuaries, and but they're incredibly valuable when everybody. And I think this is what's happening. This is a much more, we used to sort of 20 years ago when I started in this business was, you talk about the function. Should I be claims or should I be underwriting or should I be? Well, actually, now that's breaking down a bit, and I think it will break down a lot more.
Right.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. Simon, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining us. I'm sure Keys, with your help, is going to go on to greater things and, as we said, be a massive catalyst for change. And I actually think that all of these conversations about technology come back to people and humans, and actually that's what really matters. And I'm quite glad about that, actually, in the end. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.